Well, should we give this a try? All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thought Process number one. And just to give a little preamble here, uh, we're taking our Philosophy Club of West Bend discussions to another level for YouTube and all of that. So I'm joined with Jeff Camlin, Joe, Deskpop Bear. The four of us are four out of seven are original members of the Philosophy Club, if I'm not mistaken. Was our number originally seven?
I feel like it was. I think we like put a cap on it.
We did, yeah.
We did for a while there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not everybody's going to be available for every week that we try this, but there were seven of us. I think we're down to six now. I think we officially lost one founding member, but the others of us have been doing this for about 6 years. So the idea is that we're going to use the structure for these videos to keep things focused. And I will explain the structure in greater depth in another video. But the short version is we modified the rules for Debate Club, which is one side versus another side. We changed those rules to accommodate not just two sides arguing back and forth, but a group discussion where there may be five people with five very different takes on the same matter. So not going into details today, we'll save that for another time. The basic idea is one person makes up to a 5-minute argument. Everyone else is free to make a counter argument, either supporting or refuting something that was said previously, either the original speaker or a commenter that spoke before them. When everyone's had their turn, the original speaker can make a closing argument. And when that's happened, the next person who would like to make a 5-minute argument is free to do so. And we'll do that until everyone's fairly had their say. Every time we've done this, at least one person has abstained from either making a comment or a full-fledged argument. So it's a question of how the discussion goes. And our discussion today is a very good topic for our very first video. What do you need to talk philosophically? That's a good topic. And Jeff, can you remind me what is your degree that you have now?
Well, I'm working on a graduate degree, a master's degree in Christian wisdom.
Okay. So you're working on your master's.
Philosophy, a concentration within philosophy.
Mm-hmm. I've got a bachelor's as a result of my seminary training. All priests have a bachelor's in philosophy before they move on to theology. So every time you meet a priest, you're talking to someone that did take at least one class in logic. People don't realize that enough. And then Joe and Deskpop, do you have any formal background in philosophy?
I do not.
Mm-hmm.
I do not as well.
All right. That's kind of what I suspected. But the whole point of this talk is no, you don't need necessarily, unless, of course, Jeff argues this in his turn, you don't need formal training to do this. And part of the reason I wanted this to be a topic for a while now, just to give you a little preamble on where this kind of came up with in my brain. In seminary, I loved my philosophy classes. I found it energizing. I found it exciting. And when I was nearing the end of my time in pre-theology, so philosophy, I said to one of my philosophy professors, like, this is great. I think I might start going to philosophy conventions when I can make the time. And my philosophy professor goes, Justin, do not go there. You will hate it. Like you are a common citizen who loves truth, and you have gotten a smattering of philosophical background. Philosophy conventions will drive you crazy. Like, that's not why people go to those. And I don't know if he was speaking true on that. I've never actually been to a philosophy convention, but it's the idea that when experts in a particular field get together, they talk about such ridiculously specific matters and subjects that nobody else can keep up. And something is lost, I suppose, in terms of the sheer joy of appreciating what got you into that field in the first place. And so part of the reason I have dearly loved our time as a philosophy club is it's not about proving that we deserve our PhDs or masters or anything like that, but we genuinely enjoy the conversation and the discussion and the appreciation for truth. And so here we are.
Harumph.
Harumph, indeed. Yes, give the mayor a harumph. So on that note, would anyone like to make the first 5-minute assertion? 5 minutes or less, obviously.
Yeah, I can.
Go for it.
All right. So what is
keep an eye
needed?
on the time.
Yeah. What is needed for philosophy? Now, part of philosophy is interpreting language, subjects and propositions. And we've done this, whether you have a philosophical background or not, since the time you could speak. But if you want to go that next step to not just analyzing your own or forming your own propositions and arguments, but also analyzing others and seeing the fallacies and weaknesses in other arguments, I'd recommend Socratic logic by a guy named Kreeft. Now, there's two sides to logic. There's what's called classical Socratic logic, and there's also symbolic logic. Symbolic logic came about during the modern era or contemporary times with computers. Terms are represented by symbols. Now, the problem with symbolic logic is the traditional or Socratic logic method, you actually have real words with real meanings as the terms. So you have to translate a term into a symbol into symbolic logic, and some of the essence of that word and meaning of that word is lost when you transfer it into symbolic logic, which is what a lot of philosophers do nowadays. So this book is more on the former with Socratic logic and goes through identifying terms, propositions, subjects, analyzing arguments, and helping you formal arguments with the syllogism. Now, the syllogism is kind of a staple of argumentation. For example, the classic example is Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. So that's a syllogism of argumentation. So you have clear terms, you have very well-defined subjects, and the argument is valid. So you learn a lot about argumentation and determining truth from statements and arguments. Am I at 5 minutes yet? Oh, okay. So I think that's the first step to upping your game in philosophy is if you want to go that one extra mile, pick up Socratic Logic by Peter Kreeft. And it's a very easy to read text. Now, learning logic and argumentation is hard, so you can go slow through the chapters, but it's very complete, especially in what I call the good form of logic. It's classical logic versus symbolic logic, which I think you really want to stay away from, especially in conversational argumentation and bringing up propositions of your own. And I think that covers that. So moral of the story is there's two types of logic. I'd recommend learning more about Socratic logic, or it's also called classical logic, versus symbolic logic.
All right. 4 minutes, not bad. Well, I'll jump in for my first comment on that. Peter Kreeft is in fact a hero of mine. I haven't read the book you mentioned, but in another book he wrote, he did mention that to talk about definitions and speaking as Socrates did, you can't just explain what something is. You must explain what something is not. It is what a thing is and what it does, but also how it differs from things that might be fairly similar to it. If you say, well, a dog is a four-legged animal, that is correct. But you also have to explain how a dog is not any other kind of four-legged animal. There's a bunch of those, I think. So Peter Kreeft definitely knows what he's talking about. And yeah, if you ever want to dabble in philosophical thought, it's always good to start at the beginning. And Socrates is the beginning.
Deskpop, you want to go? I'm thinking.
We are both thinking as I'm in the shitter of my car.
So restate the topic again.
The original topic, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
What do you need to think philosophically?
Okay. I could have gone down like many avenues, Jeff. Like you summarized it all pretty dang good in 4 minutes. All right, so I'll go. I think I was thinking more logically about that topic, less about what are the tools you need, more of what are the state that you're in. So I agree with Jeff's assertion about the types of books you can read and the tools you can equip yourself to understand how to think philosophically. But I think about it more in a raw version of how did people get to becoming thinking philosophically? Because for most of our existence, your thought should be focused on reproducing and surviving. So there wasn't really philosophy for many, many years. So I look as what are the tools you need to think philosophically? It'd be comfort in living would be a main one. So I was thinking more of things like that. Like you'd have to have adequate access to food and water to where it's not clouding your mind with focus, because if you run out of that, you no longer exist. So, a safe environment, food and water. Outside of that, when you're comfortable, I believe you're able to think more rationally. So if you think about how people act in society when they're scared, how do they think? Anytime people are stressed, how do they think? So in today's society, you look at the different disorders we have, it's all relative to our more ancient bodies of stress equals danger to myself or my family or my tribe, and stress also equals hunger. So we introduced new types of stress in our society. I actually read this recently. It was a really nice way to put it. Life never gave us lemons. We created them by splicing a very bitter orange with a citron. And that's, if you think about it, it's really true. What are the things that stress us? They're all self-induced because, we do need a job to survive to get food, but it's way easier than it used to be. So our stress levels are at the levels as if we're being attacked by a tiger or our family is starving and we don't know what to do. So when we're in that state, you get in a one-track mind. There's one solution to hunger: food. So if you're stressed and you need food, that's all you're going to think about. You're going to be thinking about that one thing. Well, now if you get stressed nowadays and you want to, philosophize the meaning of a dog, if you're stressed or you're in a state where you can't think clearly, you're not going to be able to do that accurately. You will come out with a quick answer of dogs have 4 legs and a tail. That's all that matters now. I'm stressed. I need to find the dog. I need to hunt the dog. Versus, so I would say just the tools you need is to be in a relaxed state of mind. And that doesn't necessarily mean rich, or am I out of time? Am I coming close?
Pretty close, yeah.
Okay. I'll close it with, that doesn't necessarily mean, I'm rich and comfortable. It's comfortable in your life. So you could be stressed about things that aren't about food or anything, how you look, how you get along with your peers, things like that. You have to put your mind at peace before you can start philosophically thinking about the world. The end.
I agree with Joe to an extent. I'm going to take a slightly Catholic perspective on it. And it all comes down to the creator, right? And we are his children. So I think it's already inherently put into our heart and our mind to always seek out who our creator is. And no matter what your situation is, like everyone, the billions of people that have ever been on this planet have always questioned, who am I? Who created me? What is this life for? Creed, Scott Stapp. What's this life for? I think we've all had those moments in life. I don't care, no matter where it was, whether you're just fighting for food or living a luxurious lifestyle. We all have that moment in life, and we ask those philosophical questions, and we always are seeking truth. So philosophy, the way I see it, is we are all philosophical. It is a study of life. It is a study of why do we even exist? So life is philosophy. It's our job and our duty, to the best of our abilities, to figure out life. That's my point.
All right. So Luke, was that your argument, or was that your response to Jeff?
It's a great question.
Yeah. It sounded more like your own thing.
I don't think it was an argument. I'm just adding to it. I was piggybacking off of Joe, and then just throw my own ideas to it.
Nope,
so
that counts. Just wanted to make sure I was following correctly. In that case, Jeff, you've got 2 minutes to make a closing argument.
Okay, yeah, I think Joe brought up a good thing on you can't philosophize while your amygdala is triggered and pumping out adrenaline. You just don't think as much to get the most out of philosophy. Is like you said, having some sort of relaxed state, whatever it is. It could be as simple as sitting on a couch at 4 in the morning or 11 at night for your environment or yourself to think philosophically. And Luke sounded more like the universal. We all have questions we ask ourselves once in a while. And that is where I think logic can help out. You move through your thoughts, and you can get closer to the truth from something, what's called universal, to something particular. And that's a natural philosophical movement. The other natural movement is to think about something particular and move out toward to see if it has commonality with other things in the world to the universal. And that's both of those two movements are called induction and deduction. Deduction was the former, going from a universal thought, God, why am I here, to a particular, I'm here because X, Y, Z. So that'd be going from a universal to a particular.
Okay.
And you can't do that in emergency mode. And I would definitely agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
That's
cool.
it. Yeah.
Well, good first round. Thanks, everyone. Unless Deskpop or Joe are ready to go, I've got my 5 minutes all set.
Yep, you go for it.
So don't worry, this is cutting into my time. Joe, I do agree with what you said before. The way I learned it is for elements of civilization such as philosophy, you need leisure time.
Yeah.
You need time where you're not fighting for survival. So that definitely sounded familiar to me. So thinking about this topic, because there are a lot of ways this could go. My answer, my assertion, what do you need to think philosophically? I'm going to do the communication thing. One of the key ingredients, way more important than a degree, way more important than background or anything like that, is you need the basic ability to communicate and express a thought. It can be a belief, it can be a value, it can be a product of your imagination. That doesn't matter. But whatever you have going on in your head, you need to communicate it and express it where another person is capable of understanding you and then responding back either in support of it or to challenge it in some way. When you don't have that, when you can't express your thoughts in a coherent way that makes sense to another human being, well, then you're lost in your head. And in all likelihood, you're not going to grow. You're not going to refine your thoughts, because as people, we need that. We need to share our thoughts, beliefs, our theories. That is a huge part of how we learn. So even if you're brilliant in your head, if you don't have the ability or the skill to communicate it, you're not likely to overcome whatever errors or shortcomings are present. A classic example of how you need to communicate something, regardless of how well you think you understand your own mind. I heard this great conversation, this great guest speaker talking about immigration. And I was so excited because he did such a great job. And I tried to summarize it to a family member with strong political views. I'm not going to tell you which side. And the mere fact that I brought up immigration, he immediately started talking about the elements of immigration that mattered deeply to him, to the point where he didn't really care about what I was trying to share about this other person because it wasn't relevant to his passions involving immigration. So in that case, I failed to do anything meaningful with the information in my head because I was talking to someone who is not really capable of sharing a thought with me. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. There was a gap in communication. I didn't teach him anything, and I didn't learn anything from him in return. If that communication gap had been resolved somehow, I think that would have gone very differently. So, in summary, to be philosophical, you need to communicate your thoughts and express them so that another person can respond to them appropriately, constructively, and meaningfully.
All right, I'll go. Otherwise, I'll forget it. All right, tell me when you're ready. So I'm gonna agree with you and expand upon it because you made me think about it differently. So it's like between you and Jeff, I'm making my argument and my rebuttal all within just my responses.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, I stick to kind of what I said with Jeff, but you made me think of the why that's important, because many people could make the argument that we really don't need to philosophize because it can go negatively, and it can. If you get in your own head, it can go negatively. So why even do that? If everyone just has their job and is assigned to it, society can function, and we don't cause too many problems. The issue with that is then that keeps us stuck where we currently are. And I think you brought that to light. Now, you were talking about a conversation about learning with a family member about something that's political in nature just because of the current environment we're in. But the reality is any decision we've ever made that's helped us grow and expand as a society has been a philosophical discussion at some extent. So we started farming and tilling the land, and then one farmer one day looked across the street to the other farmer and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this." And they might have said, "Well, that's dumb, and here's why it's dumb." And he says, "No, this is great, and here's why it's great." And then they fought maybe, and then one did it out of spite, and then you find out if it works better or not. That was a real short, very violent philosophical discussion on how to farm land. But if those types of things never occurred, we would never discover new crazy things. You think about a lot of the stuff that we use today that was born out of some crazy philosophical idea that occurred. And maybe that philosophical discussion occurred in one's own head. If you're open up enough to weigh the pros and cons with yourself, you're having a philosophical debate about something. So if it required a degree, if it required a bunch of tools that people didn't innately have in a relaxed state or in a state where you're prepared to have a philosophical discussion, there'd be no advancement of civilization. So my assertion is I agree with you, and it's just a neat way to think about how we advance using talking. I'll take your harumph. So, someone else has got to go now.
Yeah.
We should do an automatic picker, like just spin a wheel or something.
Clockwise, counterclockwise.
Yeah, or just at random.
I'll go, but I'll just use my time to support what Justin and Joe did say, because it got me thinking in terms of my response last round is, yeah, you must have your basic needs met in order to think beyond those basic needs. So that is a very good, valid point as well. So you're winning your side of the argument on that point. But it still doesn't, I still feel like the point I did bring up, I think is also valid and true. And in one sense, it could be looking at how we operate and function as humans in this world we are in now. I think we've come accustomed to take those feelings and like push them down into our gut. Like, no, I don't need to worry about the question of life and about God and all this stuff. I'm just going to literally busy myself with my day to day and not think about it. So it's like we've almost swung that pendulum so far to the left that we distract ourselves to even try to even entertain those types of questions. Because we already know, like, well, if I'm entertaining the meaning of life, it's going to take me away from my responsibilities, when actually, in all reality, that's part of the reason why you're here on this planet. You're supposed to question the meaning of life. So it's interesting how we balance priority. So when it comes to what do you need to be able to discuss philosophy, we have everything we need right now. And there's no reason. Actually, I would argue there's no excuse not to philosophize, to talk philosophy. It should be, we need to do it, especially given the current climate of society. Is like, we need to start talking about this, because if we don't, we're just going to destroy ourselves. So we need to start talking philosophy more as a culture.
How many minutes we get again? I'm sorry.
2.
Deuce.
Nice try, Camlin.
I'd like to highlight what Joe and Pop Bear said about We did need leisure time to start thinking rationally and philosophically. And today we do have leisure time, but as Deskpop Bear said, the tendency is to fill it up with distractions, I guess, for lack of a better term, of entertainment, us with screens. And I think one of the reasons is the one missing component that wasn't brought up of being able to philosophize and talk about think, as Father Justin alluded to it, is to get a group of people together, which it's hard to get a group of people together to meet consistently and talk about things, just with schedules and life and all this and that. So you have to kind of elevate that desire to know and to talk to other people a little bit to get that, I guess, critical mass to get the group going. Because the group can be probably one of the hardest parts of philosophizing and thinking about something.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks, guys. For my 2-minute rebuttal, or concluding remark, I should say. First of all, you may have noticed that I haven't been holding anybody to the 2-minute mark. This is a gentleman's group. We don't need to worry about that too much. But yeah, I think we're pretty much on the same page for this subtopic. I guess for my concluding remark, though, again, the element of back and forth conversation, the inherent value in that. It's kind of like what I say at the end of my homilies every once in a while. You don't actually need to agree with me. That's not the point of a priest's sermon. At least 9 times out of 10, anyway. If what I have to share in church, in a philosophy group, at Thanksgiving dinner with family, if there's a back and forth and someone does illustrate some sort of error or lacking piece of information, that makes it worthwhile. I have had I've been a priest for 8 years now. And there are a number of standard messages that I have, which have been refined over the years because I've said something in church and someone, if they say it in mean, chances are I don't learn from them. But every once in a while, I get someone who lovingly says, Father Justin, I kind of agreed with you-ish, but, have you considered this, this, and this? And I very often have integrated that piece of commentary and feedback into the ways I've revisited those common topics. So, yeah, conversation is important. It might even be more important than being the one in the right or being the one closer to truth at the beginning. Because when we're together as people, we have a tendency to learn from one another.
Harumph.
That was 2 minutes on that.
Nice. All right.
Well, that's the 50% mark anyway. So, Joe, Deskpop, any?
I'll go. I'm gonna do more of like a statement, just because
right.
I've kind of made my argument. We're all kind of on the same page. I've liked hearing everyone's responses, and to your point, Justin, how you said, I think was it you or Jeff that said it's almost necessary for individuals to do it? Was that Jeff? Maybe on your 2-minute.
Well, I mentioned it, but Father Justin brought it up originally.
Okay. I like that because it's important for the conversation to happen. I just like what you said, too. It's also not necessarily important that you're right. And I thought about that real quick. I didn't think about it a lot. But one of my favorite lines from the movie Thank You for Smoking. Has everyone seen that movie? Which I think is like the greatest movie if you want to watch somebody how catching flies with honey is better and how you can really Almost in a negative way, get people convinced to do things your way. But what's important about that is when he talked about when he was arguing with another party or discussing something, he said my favorite words that I think about when I speak with politics with anybody. I don't like doing politics one-on-one for this reason, because a lot of times it's not philosophy, because you get that fight or flight adrenaline dump when you're defending something very vigorously from your side. It also doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing for you and the individual. But in the movie, he said, I'm not here to convince that person. I'm here to convince them. And he pointed to the audience. And the idea is you're either philosophizing or you're having an argument and you're trying to win an argument. Both of those things can have different outcomes. I feel like an argument, if you think is a philosophical discussion, can win people over to a potentially negative side using emotion. Whereas I think raw philosophy is a discussion where as much of human emotion is removed as physically possible. I think that's partially why I've really liked this group. I think we all do tend to fall in the same type of category in our beliefs, but I feel like we've gotten comfortable enough and close enough where we're able to pontificate and think about alternative sides to your own beliefs, to push it out there. And I think why our group has done well is outside of just having the conversation, I think sometimes we're vulnerable, and I think we are very honest. And I think if I'm going to summarize the other types of things I think you would need those two things. And you'd have to really mean it. And I think that's really tough for people to do. It's kind of like I think Luke said, when you think about the meaning of life, that's an uncomfortable thing to think about because it's an impossible thing to grasp. Our brains are not big enough. So when we're tasked with something that's uncomfortable, we go and try and find comfort. So in that case, I don't need to think about God. I don't need to think about the end of the world. I don't need to think about why we're here. I got work to do. I got to do other things to make sure I can feed my family and do all this other stuff. That's almost easier than pontificating on the meaning of life. So to summarize, I think the tools you need is that vulnerability, the willingness to admit you're wrong, and that doesn't mean you always do it. I'll say one more thing that I pulled from you, Father Justin, when I think one of the best descriptions I ever heard about why you do confession. You said it's like having a dirty room. You don't ever clean your room to the point where you say in your head, okay, this is now clean forever. But you also don't let it get dirty and say, well, it's just going to get dirty again. Let's just let it go. And I really, really liked that thought. And I try and approach that because I like to believe that I'm the type of person that will hear an opposing argument and change my view, but I definitely won't do it right away. Because if I'm presented with an argument that is a true affront to my belief, to the point where it shakes my core to say, holy cow, I never thought about it that way, and that might change my mind, just like thinking about the meaning of life, that's hard. And it actually hurts. So I'll close on this because I'm sure I'm going over time, but being able to come back even later and say, I thought about that and you were correct. And I've heard almost every single person in this group do that on more than one occasion. And I think that is why we've been doing this for 6 years. And that is why we have good discussion where we come back each week. And even if somebody says something that might be a little, not over the top, but something that pushes somebody, we all come back because we are all capable of enduring that. And that's where I think that real growth can come from in philosophy. All right.
4 minutes and 45 seconds.
Oh, well I could have swore I was over.
No, you're good. You're good. Besides my 2 minute rebuttal, I just want to point out the dirty room analogy was not me. I'd love to take credit for that. That was something you heard from Father Nathan.
I heard it from you, so you must have said it from.
I probably stole it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very honest of you.
Well, Father Nathan might watch this one day.
Yes. No, but I truly tell lots of people that analogy. I really like that. I think that's a good way to put it. And I say that for lots of other things. I tell my kids, like when we do jobs, and they're always like, "Why do I have to do this all the time?" And I use that analogy, and it makes sense.
Well, there's so much, Joe, for me to talk about there. I'm timing myself to keep myself honest because I dearly love Thank You for Smoking. That is Rhetoric and Discourse, the movie. And one thing that I really appreciated from my gaming background, this is specifically the World of Darkness White Wolf system, in the social attributes that your character can have, there are two different skills. You can pick one, both, the other, or neither. One is persuasion, and one is manipulation. Or maybe instead of persuasion, it might be charisma. But basically, one is genuinely trying to help people see things your way, and the other one is kind of the skill of manipulating people's. You mentioned emotions, but I would argue you can manipulate people with their pre-existing understandings and all of that. You can twist the facts to win the argument. But what you said that I love that movie so much. Thank You for Smoking is about a deeply manipulative man. He's good at it. It's the one thing in life he's good at, and he plays it to a T. And what do you need for philosophy? Well, you need to genuinely be interested in what is the truth, as opposed to being the winner of the argument, because everybody wants that. And when we debate politics at the dinner table, we have a tendency to want to win rather than come to an understanding of the truth. So I would say there is a huge difference between those two things.
What is the hat? The top hat?
I was trying to find a symbol for like the like giving you the pound, like the harumph, and I haven't found it yet. I'm gonna try lots of different ones. So far, I'm on top hat. I couldn't find monocle.
Top hat. No, I think what you said, Joe, vulnerability, and why we've stuck together so far. Like, what you need for philosophy is taking whatever topic is at hand and seeing it from all viewpoints to get a true understanding. If you're coming into this as I'm going to mark my ground and I'm going to dig my heels into the ground and this is my argument and you're going to try to win people over, you're totally losing the whole purpose of philosophizing in itself. To truly philosophize is to see things from all angles. So yes, you need to be vulnerable yourself to seek and to grow and to become a better individual that way. And you also, where's that music coming in from?
I'm sorry. I think that was my phone. It's connected to my board. I apologize.
Okay. No worries. You totally threw me off topic. That's okay. It's good. That's philosophy. It's all right.
All angles. Gotta look at things from all angles.
So the point I was trying to make is being open, being vulnerable, being honest, not with each other, but with yourself, and going into it. I'm going to be better coming out of this meeting. So then you can be a better person every time we do get together to share knowledge. And that knowledge that we all share, hopefully will better society as a whole.
So is it my turn? What are we doing the rebuttal, or I need a refresher on this?
It was on my comments and statements, so I didn't really make an assertion. I more summarized kind of how you guys made me feel about the topic.
So Jeff, you've got 2 minutes to respond to something that Joe said or something that Deskpop Bear or I said with response to Joe. So you got 2 minutes to make a comment on what he said.
Yeah, Joe brought up you called it philosophize, and then there's a deeper philosophy. I think what he was making the differentiation between rhetoric and philosophy, whereas rhetoric is speaking to try to persuade something. It's basically politics, and then philosophy uses conversation to kind of almost produce a truth just from the conversation, like Luke was saying, from all angles. So when you do have a good, when you do have a conversation from all angles, the truth can come out of it. Unlike rhetoric, where you're basically trying to sell a truth, which may or may not be true, but either way, you're trying to sell it. But yeah, I'd agree. That's the kind of the difference between rhetoric and philosophy is you're not trying to sell a truth. I mean, you can try, but the philosophical conversation, the value is in the discussion of, of the group. So, in summary, I think, Joe, what you're talking about was rhetoric versus real philosophical conversation.
Cool. All right, Joe, 2 minutes to conclude.
I don't really have anything to add to it. I appreciate kind of what you guys said. I'll use it as a time to just say I appreciate this group, and I'm glad that we've been doing it for so long, and I'm glad we're trying this new thing to bring it to others. I think this is really cool.
All right, harumph to that. All right, well, Deskpop, do you have an assertion or a comment or statement that you would like to make for our final one of the evening?
I will do my best with the 5 minutes I have, because as you guys know, that is a challenge for me to fill. So I think I'm going to try to bring it back to, like, what do you need in order to philosophize? And I'm going to bring my point back up that I think we are born with the capability. It's a matter of whether we tap into it or not. And if you can look at our existence as being on this planet, I think we can argue that the first human beings, are probably worried about the basic needs and so forth. But if you take the Catholic perspective of Adam and Eve, they had everything. They had nothing to worry about. They actually were able to communicate with God. So what was their excuse? Ignorance? They just didn't know any better? We don't know, right? We can speculate, which could spin off to another really cool topic, by the way. So you just look at, taking it from a Catholic viewpoint where Eve tempted Adam and ate of the tree of good and evil, and boom, their mind was blown, and they had all this knowledge, but this knowledge was actually their downfall. And it was the fall of humanity. So now we've taken thousands and thousands of years to try to climb back to where it all started, right? Hence you got the Jesus Christ coming to show us the way of how to get there, to get back to where God created humanity. He's like, hey, you were in the good graces with me. You fell out of it. I'm going to humble myself, become just like you, and show you the way to get back there. And for a lot of people, that is scary to even think about or to even talk about that idea. So where I'm trying to go is I'm going back to the analogy of the pendulum. We started being in the perfect spot. We fell and we're swinging back and forth. And the pendulum swing, I think, just keeps getting bigger and bigger either side. And I think the way this world is, we're swinging so far away from the beginning, they eventually is going to go back to where it all started. And we are now experiencing things in our life where I think more and more as society, some would call it the signs of the times. If you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, I'm seeing this on TikTok, Instagram. People are saying they have dreams. People are waking up and they're really figuring out there's more to life than waking up, brushing my teeth, go to my job. They're starting to, in their own head, they're starting to think about the question, life. What does it mean of life? What is going to go on? And You could call it the sign of the times. You could call it a spiritual awakening. The Holy Spirit is getting in everybody's heart. Could be all that. I don't know. But I think people are starting to wake up to the idea that this is real. We need to start talking about the meaning of life and start communicating to each other. Because if we don't, we're in a lot of hurt. And we might have to go through a lot of that hurt before a lot of us actually realize it. And I think when that hurt comes, there's still going to be people, nah, you're fine. You're fine. So, yeah, buckle up, because we need philosophy more than ever in this day and age. That's for sure. There you go.
I can go. So I would say I'm gonna take not the complete opposite of what you're saying, because I believe, if we're talking about like the Bible or end of times, you will never know the day nor the time. So if we can, I feel like every generation has probably had their version of how we feel. I think the difference is the one unique thing that the human race is going through right now is it's the first time in our existence that every single person on the planet's been given the power to reach every single person on the planet. And we don't know how to deal with that. And I think I'm more of an optimist. I always say I'm like an optimist nihilist. I think we're doing pretty good, actually. So with all the things that are going on, I'm more optimistic because, like I said, you've given every individual person on the planet the ability to reach everyone. And we haven't screwed it up. We really haven't. Still the world is mostly peaceful. If you look at it on large scale, we continue to get better as a civilization. Since the internet's come about, we've lifted more people out of poverty. We've fed more people than ever before. We've done a lot of good with that type of power. And that's where, I don't know if this is necessarily going against what you said or more of just looking at the times now as less dire as I think we like to feel. I think it feels like it's the worst it's ever been because we're seeing a lot of the evil that does exist in the world, but we're being shown all of it. And we don't know how to process that. If you think about it, up until 1995, you only heard bad news from your general region. We would hear about bad news. I read somewhere in a book, it might have been the book Abundance. I apologize if that's wrong, but they said back in the day, we found out about things. So if a bad hurricane hit Louisiana and we lived in Wisconsin, before television, we would find out about it. It would make the newspapers, message went across. But they said by the time you found out about it, we were the people that the disaster happened to were already recovering. The one unique thing we have access to now is we get to watch the suffering in real time. And I think why I tend to think people are more good than bad is that bugs people. And that's a good thing because it bugs you that people are suffering and you can do nothing about it. A lot of the pain we see, they just had the earthquakes in Turkey. And I was watching on TikTok, buildings collapsing and just knowing that there are possibly hundreds of people being crushed to death right in there. And what can I do? I'm in Wisconsin. I literally can't do anything, but I want to. And I don't think I'm going to go run in there. I used to be a firefighter. I might do that. But, even if you're the type of person who's like, I'll go hand out water on the corner to the people. I'll go comfort those. You want to do those types of things because if it was your village, if it was my neighborhood, I would be doing that. And that's how we respond. That's how our race survives and we go on. And we get to see all the suffering and we can do nothing about it. So we internalize it. And that's where philosophy can help externalize that and pull that out. So I don't know if that was a rebuttal or anything or more just a statement, but
No,
I liked what you said.
Related. I'll count it.
Okay.
Jeff, you want to go or would you like me to?
Yeah, I'll go. Luke brought up the end of times, and it's interesting. Spiritualism or yoga, hasn't solved the problem of feeling good about oneself. there's still a yearning of truth outside of spiritualism. They're still reaching for something that, I guess, for lack of a better term, the Buddhism and yoga just can't give them, beyond maybe temporary inner peace. So I think you're right, more and more people are worrying about the end of times. It's because they don't understand truth and don't express that and talk about it, bundle it up inside. That's pretty much all I have. But in summary, it's interesting, you bring up the end of times and people are still worried about that, yet the spiritualism and yoga was supposed to make everyone feel all fine, but we just found out that was temporary. That was a temporary fix internally to no problem at all, really.
All right, cool. Well, I like it. I'll wrap up, and then Luke will get. Oh, sorry, I was trying to avoid your real name. His name is Luke.
You can use my real name. Joe ruined it first, so it's all good.
Oh, I already did. Sorry.
Yeah,
Made it a whole hour and 15 minutes or whatever.
Okay, right. It lasted for a little bit.
Like I've said before, not being recorded, but we, one of our problems with this group is that we agree too much. So one thing that I can safely and confidently disagree with you on that, Deskpop Bear, is, getting back to where we were on Adam and Eve. I don't believe that. I don't believe there's any going back. We have to go forward. Garden of Eden, we just don't belong there anymore. We have to move forward to new heaven and new earth. And the way I see it is, it's not that we're trying to get back to the original point on a circle. It's that we're walking a path, and at some point we deviated off the path and we're lost in the woods. We're kind of going in the right direction, but it's trying to get back onto the path that we're always meant to be. And I'm sure Joe will agree with us to a certain extent. When you're lost hopelessly off the beaten path, and your adventure is over, you look back on it with pride and appreciation. In Africa, I was visiting someone in the middle of nowhere in my region, and we had a great time, but there was no transport from her village to mine. It was far too far to bike. So she got somebody for me. I paid him, and he took me back to my village on the back of his moped. And we literally got a flat tire like every 10 kilometers. That trip home, I should have been home in 2 hours. It took all day and all night. I think I got home at midnight. And I spent the entire day either on the back of a moped or at the nearest village waiting for him to repair the thing. And it was so frustrating at the time. But when I finally got home, I was filled with the sense of, wow, I can't believe I just lived through that. Like, what American from Wisconsin suburbs can say that they traveled, at least 100 kilometers of African wilderness on the back of a moped with multiple, flat tires? We have to fold in the suffering and the disappointments and the setbacks of the past, but also knowing that there is a destination we're reaching for. And I don't believe that destination is our starting point. I believe our destination and our starting point are related, but they are different points.
A rumph.
So 2 minutes to sum up, Luke. Deskpop Bear. Sorry,
okay.
Just
you can
comes
call
that
me
second
Luke
nature.
now. It's out there. It's fine.
Yeah, it's out there. Right?
I do believe I have like a swear, like I can just bleep it out when you say it. Yeah.
So Nick, our producer, we definitely have to have him bleep out Deskpop Bear's real name. That'll be hilarious.
It's all right. It's not a big deal. I thought it was funny just to leave my work alias name up on there and see what you guys are going to think. So in that, I appreciate all your guys' contributions to my topic, and that's why I love being a part of this group, because it gets me thinking more and more into terms of things that I bring up. And I, again, as we do as a group, we usually agree with one another, but I agree a little bit with what Joe said, a little bit with Jeff said, and what Father Justin said. And it just helps me rethink what I first stated a few minutes ago. And I believe that is the whole point of why we're doing this, because we have one thought and how we think about a topic, and it can be turned around really quick. Now, the question is that manipulation or is that influence? I think for us as a group, that is influence, which is a very positive thing. So that is my biggest take on this, is that we're so open and vulnerable that we can influence each other in a very positive manner that keeps us in that state of growth. And that's why this club has been together for so long, and why we're taking on this new leap together to get to the interwebs of the YouTube, and hopefully it'll catch you on here.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Good start to thought process. Couple hiccups. But I thank you all for your time. And for those of you watching, this is by far and away my longest video on my YouTube channel. But in future videos, we'll talk about, offline, we'll talk about our next possible topic. I'm not going to announce that here because I only have my own personal ideas, and that's not fair. I am going to produce a private video some other time, just me, just going through the rules, the exact rules of how this works, in case anyone watching this at home, if you want to do this with your friends or your family, it helps. And I will go into the story of why I love this system so much. It doesn't work every time. Sometimes you just need to let people speak freely for as much time as they want. But if you do need a little bit of structure in a conversation, this is not a bad start. So does anyone have any closing remarks before we call it a night?
Nope. Just thank you for putting this on and getting this all set up. I think this is a great idea.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to hit the stop recording button now. Sorry. Was Nick saying something?
Yeah, I was going to say I could contribute a little something to the conversation,
Please.
But not that it has to be a full, whatever you want to call it, thesis or whatever, with everyone rebutting or responding to me. But, just I can be the producer guy who talks at the end.
Yeah.
And you don't have to record it include in the video if you don't want. And then, not that I don't know, I guess I would just be kind of responding to your initial question of what is required for philosophy, at a bare minimum, and just to go off of a little bit of what I think Joe had said about how for philosophy you need logic and reason and facts above feelings or emotion. And I just thought, that's an important thing to remember, because emotion can be important in an argument, even if it's a philosophical argument, to further the argument. Maybe it's something that's a personal matter to you. So adding emotion on to that argument may help sway the person on the other side, but that emotion on its own can't be the argument. But the logic and the reason side of it, that is an argument all on its own. And that up against emotion on its own is always going to win. And to tie that into a little bit of what Jeff was saying about and your spirituality or your yoga doesn't work for you, that's only a temporary feeling. I think we have to remember that anytime someone has their own philosophy or something in their lives that is without God, it's always going to be temporary, and it will probably be based on emotions or feeling good for a short period of time instead of this everlasting joy, which you can only get from God, which, you know, what is God or what is Jesus? Jesus is truth, which is everlasting and unchanging. So I guess I just see, you know, really two different sides to this where, you know, you have the steady, permanent flow of logic and truth on one side, and then the other side is emotions and like overreacting and this temporary stuff that doesn't matter. So I don't really know if I have a specific point to make here. I just kind of wanted to give some general thoughts on the topic.
You just executed philosophy.
Yep.
There you go.
Bonafide philosopher now.
Good.
Bravo.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the final word, Nick. I appreciate it. And I think that's a good point for me to hit the end recording button now.